Hello, welcome to Al Jazeera's Washington, D.C. bureau, right here in the heart of the United States Capitol. So, 2 weeks, give or take, into this war. Question is, how much longer will Americans continue to stomach it? President Trump says he feels it is very much complete. That is a quote, but what does that actually mean? Gas prices are rocketing up in parts of the country. Americans are coming home, military personnel in coffins. What is the administration's message about how or when this will all end? We're going to look at that shortly. But first, Anna Burns-Francis.
Thanks, Phil. We'll look at all those issues alongside our team joining us from key locations across the Capitol. It's becoming clear the question now is who holds the balance of power? The US is using unprecedented modern weapons, but it's faced with an adversary that controls the world's most vital shipping route. Kimberly Halkett will be joining us from the decision-making powerhouse, the White House, and Alan Fisher joins us from Capitol Hill. First of all, though, Donald Trump claims this war is a success and has been won. But 6 bodies draped in American flags are being flown home to loved ones who'll never sit across the table from them again. The president's warned that this war would take a toll, but he also says the end of the conflict will only come once the job is done. So where does this leave America's aims for its mission? And where does the balance of power lie today, the 14th day of this conflict in Iran? We begin with Kimberly at the White House. And Kimberly, Donald Trump's comments on the war have been fairly emphatic. So what is the reason the American public's been given as to why this conflict is still going?
Yeah, well, the U.S. president, along with other members of the Trump administration, including the defense secretary, making the argument that this military operation has so far been a success. We know that the U.S. president even claiming early on that this war was won within an hour. But now the argument to the public is that there's a need for the ongoing military operation in order to finish the job, in the words of the U.S. president, militarily, even as there are mounting casualties in the form of wounded as well as the number of soldiers dead. Now, the Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth saying on Friday that Friday will be the busiest day yet over Iran for the U.S. military in terms of the number of armed attacks scheduled to take place. More broadly, though, what we know is that the goal of this operation, according to the White House and Pentagon, is to eliminate Iran's military as well as its ability for weapons programs to be produced or to continue. Now, again, we know that Iran is fighting back, closing the Strait of Hormuz, as well as launching missiles and drones. That's why the White House says this operation will continue until the strait is reopened and the drones and missiles are stopped.
OK, let's bring in our chief US correspondent, Alan Fisher, here joining us from Capitol Hill. Alan, members of Congress have been making a lot of noise that they were not consulted over the start of this conflict, that they haven't been given information about the mission and what is happening. Are they now receiving the information they've been asking for?
Well, to be clear, Anna, there have been briefings behind closed doors in a confidential setting for both members of the House and the Senate. But members coming out of those briefings said they didn't get answers to questions that they wanted to know about. First of all, what was the justification for the attacks? What's the end goal here? How long is the operation going to go? And one of the key questions, will American troops be put on the ground in Iran to carry out some of the fighting? Now, Donald Trump has called this a war, and that upsets many people here in the halls of Congress. Because, of course, under the Constitution, it's up to Congress to declare a war. And they say they should have been consulted before any action was taken. That's rejected by the White House. They say Article 2 of the Constitution makes it absolutely clear that the president has a right to take action when he believes there's an immediate threat to the United States. That's going to be important because there's many people on both sides of the House here who say that when the war is done, they want to ask questions in a public setting of what exactly the president knew. Why did he take the action when he did? What was the imminent threat? Was it because the Israelis were going to attack and the US had to join in? And many other questions as well. But those questions will only be asked in public when the war is done.
All right, Kimberly joining us from the White House, Alan at Capitol Hill. Thank you both. The United States has deployed a suite of new and advanced weaponry in its war with Iran, some of it for the first time. John Hendren explains how the conflict's being used by the US as a testing ground.
The Iran war is becoming a real-world testing ground for America's newest weapons. There's the low-cost, uncrewed combat attack system, the Lucas drone for short. This kamikaze drone can travel long distances and explode on impact. It's modeled on the Iranian Shahad, and it's relatively cheap at $35,000 each.
Lucas, indispensable, as many of you know, and if you don't know, this was an original Iranian drone design. We captured it, pulled the guts out, sent it back to America, put a little Made America on it, brought it back here, and we're shooting it at the Iranians.
There's the Army's new precision strike missile, also first used in Iran, with a range of more than 500 kilometers. It targets critical infrastructure at a cost of $1.6 million each. The F-35 fighter is considered the most advanced and lethal stealth fighter jet in the world. It is 20 years old, but an Israeli version achieved a historic first in Iran. It shot down another jet in air-to-air combat over Tehran. But at $80 million apiece, it's pricey. There's also a new variant of the Tomahawk missile deployed in Iran at $2 million each. In the Middle East, those weapons join an unprecedented array of U.S. weaponry in modern warfare.
Our munitions are full up, and our will is ironclad.
There are 50,000 troops in the air, on land, and at sea. Fighter jets, 200 of them, 2 aircraft carriers, the USS Abraham Lincoln and the USS Gerald R. Ford, and there are the floating strike groups that surround them. There are 3 types of bombers, the B-1, the Batwing B-2, and the Cold War-era B-52. These personnel and weaponry surround Iran with submarines, ships, and rocket launchers, and fighter jets. They're all arrayed throughout the Middle East, in the Gulf, on the Arabian Sea, and at regional bases. The U.S. forces are using standoff weaponry to target Iran with Tomahawk cruise missiles, precision strike missiles, and attack drones. And they're using F-35 fighter jets for closer combat. They're arrayed for launch in the Gulf, on the Arabian Sea, in Iraq, and at other regional bases, and on aircraft carrier strike groups. Together, it's all part of the most massive deployment of weaponry by a single country in the 21st century. John Hendren, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Well, all the firepower in the world, however, is no guarantee of success. To discuss this further, I'm joined now by Trita Parsi, former president of the National Iranian-American Council, now with the Quincy Institute. And also with me is Harlan Ullman, a former US naval officer, now with the Atlantic Council, and a strategic advisor for the Killowen Group. Thank you both, gentlemen, for coming in. Harlan, I'll start with you. We've just seen that story there from John Hendren. We have heard also President Trump fairly emphatic that the war has been won, although it is not over. Has the war been won?
Of course not. And the fundamental problems we face, how do you defeat an enemy whose strategy is to win by not losing? Can Iran tolerate far more punishment than we can? And the answer is economically, they're killing us with what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. The economic penalty is going to be huge, and they're going to persist. They're going to be defiant, and we have no way of opening up the strait.
I'll ask a more nuanced question then, Trita, because we were publicly at least told that this would be a short, sharp offensive. It's clearly now turning into a much longer, protracted conflict. Then does that lead us to think that where does the balance of power now lie?
Well, the United States went into this with a completely wrong assumption that the Iranians are much weaker than they are. That's part of the reason why Trump told regional leaders that this will only take 4 days. It's going to take some time for the Trump administration to understand that not only are they not going to be able to win this war in that short time frame, they're probably not even going to be able to win the war, but also in order for the Iranians to stop the war, because they have a say in this as well. They're not just going to accept any ceasefire. They're going to extract the price beyond what they already have extracted.
Harlan, the US military is using, as we just spoke about, a suite of very advanced technology and artificial intelligence. Now, that has been, obviously, to their benefit in some cases. There are now military investigations in other circumstances. However, how much would you say that the use of this advanced technology has contributed to the success, if you would call it success, of the mission so far?
Not very much, because, as I said, air power never wins a battle. It never wins a war. The only time that air power strategically was successful was in August 1945 when we dropped 2 nuclear weapons on Japan, forcing their surrender. Unless you can threaten on the ground and use ground forces, air power will not work alone. What is it going to take for us to relearn that lesson? We failed to use it in Vietnam when we thought we had military superiority. We failed in Afghanistan, we failed in Iraq, and on the current course, we're not doing very well in Iran.
Well, of course, Donald Trump is already vowing to hit Iran even harder if it continues to block global trade. Tehran's been using multiple strategies to interrupt the global economy, jolting international markets. Let's take a look at this report from Mani Rapallo from Washington, D.C.
Remember those who have not returned.
The United States top diplomat Marco Rubio said this week that Iran's military has been all but destroyed.
I want everyone to know your military is getting the job done, and every single day, this regime in Iran has less missiles, has less launchers, their factories work less, and their navy is being eviscerated. And the world is going to be a safer and a better place when this mission is accomplished.
Despite reports that Iran's missile capabilities have been degraded by as much as 90%, analysts say Tehran still holds a powerful form of leverage as it tries to continue to resist both the United States and Israel in the widening conflict. That strategy largely centers on geography. Iran sits along the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important energy choke points. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes through this narrow shipping lane every day, and Iran has long threatened to shut it down. From placing mines in the waterway to targeting tankers or even striking Gulf oil infrastructure, Tehran has several ways of causing significant disruption to global energy supplies. Analysts say the goal may be one of two things: either force Washington and its allies back to the negotiating table, or trigger a global energy shock, pushing oil prices to record highs and sparking a worldwide inflation crisis. Though formal direct diplomacy between the United States and Iran has effectively collapsed, the economic impact this conflict could have globally may leave U.S. officials with little option but to work diplomatically to keep energy shipments flowing. The U.S. and Israel continue to rely on military might, which includes some of the most advanced weapon systems in the world. But despite degraded military capabilities, Iran still holds a strategic card, perhaps not on the battlefield, but in its ability to damage the global economy. Manuel Rapallo, Al Jazeera, Washington.
All right, Harlan and Tritta, I'll bring you back in. Tritta, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defence, has said the only reason the Strait of Hormuz is closed at the moment is because of Iran. What do you make of that comment?
Well, in some ways, it's obviously true, but it's only true because the United States started a war of choice. Had the United States not started that war together with Israel, the Strait would be open today. What I think is also very important now is that key states are now reaching out to the Iranians to try to find a way to negotiate their own safe passage. The Indians already struck a deal. The Europeans, France and Italy, have done so as well. They've gone to Iran to do this, not to Washington. And that reflects very clearly who is in control of the situation over there.
You make an interesting point there, Tritta, because one of the promises, obviously, the Strait closing is bad for a multitude of reasons and a multitude of interested parties. Oil, shipping, global trade, all of those things just mentioned there. President Trump, though, has said the US military or the US Navy will be able to escort those ships through. Now, we've seen other leaders in the administration perhaps be reluctant to reinforce that view, but do you see that as a possibility that the US can escort those shipping lanes and make them open again?
No. It will be exceedingly difficult to do. It will be very, very bloody. The fact is that Iran has a huge advantage here with mines, suicide craft, and so forth. And all they need to do is hit an American ship. They don't have to sink one. So you can imagine the perceptions of what happens then. The biggest question is, what will it cost to open the Strait? My guess is about $1 trillion. And my guess is that the Saudis and the Emirates will be delighted to pay, well, not delighted, but be forced to pay that price because it's the cheapest way out. Otherwise, Iran can keep that closed until oil is 8, 9, 10, whatever it is, $100 a barrel. And gasoline is going to be $5, $6, $7, $8, or $9 a gallon. And what do Americans have to say that with November looming?
$1 trillion is a lot, right? But until you look at the cost of everything else.
The November elections are looming, and Donald Trump must be aware of that.
All right, one last question here, and I want to quote to make sure I've got this right. Security Chief Ali Larijani has said, Iran will not relent until making America sorry for this grave miscalculation. What does that look like for Iran?
Well, the reason why the Iranians are saying this is because they believe that unless this war ends up becoming so costly that the United States concludes that it was a mistake starting it in the first place, Unless that happens, they fear that the United States will restart the war a couple of months down the road. If the Iranians agree to a ceasefire prematurely without having inflicted that cost, they believe that it will be just what happened in June of last year. They agreed to a ceasefire, and 8 months later, Israel and the United States was back. So I think there's going to be an effort to amass a significant amount of cost, and it will primarily be on the economic front, in which they are going to move towards destroying Trump's presidency.
Harlan, we've looked at a spokesman for Iran's military has said the gates of hell have now been opened. Now, this was in a media released across a number of social platforms and internet sites. The US military will also be watching these sorts of videos and the sorts of rhetoric coming out from Iran's leadership, just like you and I are. What will they be thinking about those sorts of comments?
They will be ignoring that. The fundamental problem is that military force cannot and will not resolve the situation. And unless and until American presidents learn this lesson, these are going to be future Vietnams, they're going to be future Iraqs and Afghanistan, and we're repeating this issue right now. No matter how good the American military is, it ain't good enough to win this by air power and naval power alone. And unless we learn that, again, we're going to be in big, big trouble. And as I said, gasoline at $7 or $8 a gallon may be one of the final outcomes that will end this war.
Former US Naval Officer Harlan Ullman and Trita Parsi, former officer of the President of the National Iranian-American Council and now at the Quincy Institute. Thank you both.
Thank you so much.
The impact of this war on the future of the United States military has been getting a lot of attention in the media. Iran's been hit by billions of dollars of high-tech weaponry, much of it enhanced by the use of artificial intelligence. That's degraded stockpiles that leave the US potentially vulnerable to other threats, such as those from China. And while Iran has its own advanced weapons, its use of geography is proving to be perhaps its most effective. Here's Phil Lavelle again with the details.
So this whole issue of the balance of power, what that looks like is really getting a lot of media attention here in the United States, both in terms of the economy, but also the weaponry. So let's take a look at how it's being reported in the Wall Street Journal. It's really leaning into how these weapons are financed. So it says, Pentagon races to secure money for Iran operations and munitions. And it highlights the position that the Defense Department is in now. Look, wrestling with how to pay for a war with an indefinite end date. It also is facing an industrial base that was already stretched to meet current demand and potential threats from China. Next up, it is the Washington Post. It says how the US is using AI and space tools in that conflict with Iran. So it's really leaning into the AI aspect here. And it's quoting the head of CENTCOM, US Central Command, saying the US is leveraging a variety of advanced AI tools. And there is more, because AI is big news at the moment in the defense industries. These systems helped us sift through vast amounts of data in seconds, so our leaders can cut through the noise and make smarter decisions faster than the enemy can react. And one final quote from that head of CENTCOM, advanced AI tools can turn processes that used to take hours and sometimes even days into seconds. Next up, it is NPR, National Public Radio, and it says old school tricks and AI tech are weapons in the Iran war. So it's really showing how the battlefield has changed. Look, being fought on a hybrid digital physical battlefield with old school deception tactics and cutting edge AI technology. This is a quote from General Dan Kane, the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Coordinated space and cyber operations effectively disrupted communications and sensor networks across the area of responsibility, leaving the adversary without the ability to see, coordinate, or respond effectively. We're going to move on to TV next, to MS Now. This is one of the more progressive liberal networks. That's Rachel Maddow. She's one of their big anchors, and she's concerned just about how long these weapon supplies could last.
Russia is obviously enjoying seeing the United States burn up lots and lots and lots of missiles and interceptor munitions in the Middle East. So we'll be less happy and less able to provide those same types of weapons to Ukraine to fight against Russia.
And of course, you'll remember just a week ago, Donald Trump had those defense company chiefs at the White House talking about how they were going to quadruple their production lines. Right, next up, we're going to go to Fox News. And this is Maria Bartiromo. She's a big anchor there. She deals with the economy. She was talking to the White House press secretary all about how that folds into it and what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz.
Oil executives are telling me that more security is needed. So we want to understand specifically when we might see a let up here. It feels like the Iranians are threatening the U.S., saying, yeah, come to the Strait. We welcome you to actually ramp up the fight.
And this could be a big turning point for the American people. Remember, gas prices are shooting up in parts of the country. America loves its cars. Many people vote with their pocketbooks. We have an election in November. This is not just a big international issue, it's also a big domestic one too.
Phil Lavelle reporting. And the public perception of how the war's going in Iran has become a daily online debate amongst American leaders and commentators. Alex Baird has this roundup of how it's all playing out on social media.
Well, in Donald Trump's eyes, the war is a success. In a typically long Truth Social post, he said, "We are totally destroying Iran. Iran's military has been decimated and its leaders wiped from the face of the earth." That set the tone from the White House, as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's presser pushed across social media.
Never before has a modern, capable military, which Iran used to have, been so quickly destroyed and made combat ineffective, devastated.
Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah of Iran, is based here in the United States and has also taken to social media, echoing that White House line that the final struggle is here and telling Iranians not to sacrifice themselves for the Iranian government. But among American conservatives, there's a split from that line. Megyn Kelly, a former Fox News host and influential conservative podcaster, reposting this 5-month-old status from Charlie Kirk, who was murdered late last year, saying he saw the truth. His key messages: war would be a catastrophic mistake and could easily become a calamity.
That's all for now from Washington, D.C. From the nation's capital, we'll keep following the decisions that shape America and influence the world. Do stay with us as we head back to Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha.